Hello and welcome. Tonight, former President Olusegun Obasanjo bemoans what he describes as the inability of Nigeria to live up to expectations since independence, says the country has disappointed Africa and the world. House of Representatives promises a legislative agenda focused on championing the yearnings of Nigerians. Stakeholders challenge the lawmakers on effective implementation. Civil society organizations ask INEC to provide more detailed explanations on its inability to transmit election results real time on the day of the 2023 presidential election. And despite mass protests, Israeli parliament passes highly controversial judicial bill that clips the power of the country's Supreme Court.
On business news tonight, foreign transactions on the Nigerian exchange rise to over 145 billion naira in the first 6 months of the year.
On sports news tonight, Paris Saint-Germain grants permission for Kylian Mbappe to speak to Al Hilal after the Saudi club's world record £259 million bid.
And from the nation's capital, Speaker of the House of Representatives meets with leadership of the National Association of Resident Doctors in a move to avert another planned industrial action by the doctors.
By October the 1st this year, Nigeria will be celebrating her 63rd independence. The question is, where is the country among the Committee of Nations? Former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo is lamenting the inability of Nigeria to live up to expectations since independence, maintaining that the country has disappointed Africa and the world. Chief Obasanjo also blamed the nation's level of development on inconsistent policy by succeeding administrations. He was speaking virtually during the public presentation of a book by former Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Mr. Olusegun Aganga, in Abuja.
Former ministers and heads of government parastatals, members of the diplomatic corps, and traditional rulers were some of the guests at the launch of the book, authored by the former Minister of Industries, Trade and Investment, Mr. Olusegun Aganga, titled Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa. The book takes a look at how Nigeria can take its place amongst the Committee of Nations by adopting principles that will impact positively to its development. Two former presidents who spoke virtually allude to this fact, stating that policy consistency, its implementation and equity must be the watchword for any administration.
On October 7, 1960, Nigeria was referred to as giant in the sun. As at that time, the expectation of Africa and the rest of the world was for Nigeria to be a giant in the world. But over the past 63 years, we have not lived up to expectation. We have disappointed ourselves. We have disappointed Africa. We have disappointed the black race. And we have disappointed the world.
I'll say that the book is a resource on development and a pathway to progress, focusing on the solutions Nigeria needs in order to unleash its greatness for the good of our people.
President Bola Tinubu was represented at the event by the Special Advisor on Monetary Policy, Mr. Olawale Edun, and he highlights steps that must be taken for Nigeria to achieve self-reliance.
With concerted effort, Nigeria can stem the brain drain, and the initiatives to this end include investing substantially in education, research, technology, and that will create the enabling environment for growth and innovation. Also, by encouraging the implementation of competitive compensation packages and career advancement opportunities for professionals in critical sectors.
The author of the book speaks on what informed the title and urges the federal government to come up with policies that will make investments thrive.
Where you bring the best brain in diaspora in each of the sectors, economy, education, health and all that, working with people in Nigeria to deal with the issues we have in this country. That way we leverage on their knowledge, we leverage on their exposure, we leverage on their network and relationship. We need to build this country together as a people.
The book is then launched. The book provides questions and solutions to governance and how to better position the nation towards socio-economic development.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has been speaking on its plan for its 10th session, promising to champion the yearnings of Nigerians. This pledge was made by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, while addressing a stakeholders meeting organized by the House Ad Hoc Committee on Legislative Agenda in Abuja. Other participants at the event asked the lawmakers to ensure that the agenda is objectively executed.
In preparation for the unveiling of its legislative agenda, the 10th House of Representatives, in partnership with the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, is holding this stakeholders engagement. The idea is to collate submissions from different segments of the society to guide the House on its areas of focus.
We have outlined 6 key pillars that will serve as foundation for our legislative agenda: economic empowerment and diversification, infrastructure development, education and human capital development, healthcare for all, transparent governance and accountability, security and safety of persons and property.
The National Assembly does have a key role to play in ensuring that the challenges of living in Nigeria today is not so harsh as to force unintended consequences on the country.
For the Speaker of the House, citizens can hold lawmakers accountable as the House will operate an open National Assembly.
The House will pay priority attention to participatory budgeting process and delivery, law reform, electoral reform, women's participation and inclusion in governance, among others. Our desire is to have a legislative agenda that meets the yearning and aspirations of citizens and which they will use as a benchmark to evaluate and assess our performance after 4 years.
Stakeholders present make their contributions relating to the interests of sections of society they represent.
We want extra seat bills for women. And then we will get the extra seats, we'll be talking about affirmative action, about citizenship and indigenship. But the most important bill for us is the extra seats bill. I just came back from Rwanda, and I was so ashamed when we were talking about women's political participation, especially at the parliament level.
For children with disabilities, there's nothing to write home about. They cannot afford school fees. Even those that can afford, the schools, the facilities, the services are not inclusive. They are not accessible for children with disabilities.
Nigerians look forward to the legislative agenda of the House, which is a working document with which the lawmakers will be held to account, especially considering the current living condition in the country. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
To judicial matters, the National Assembly Election Petition Tribunal sitting in Asaba has declared Mr. Ndidi Elumelu of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, as the winner of the 2023 House of Representatives election for Anyocha Oshimili Federal Constituency in Delta State. The tribunal nullified the declaration of Mr. Ngozi Okolie of the Labour Party by the Independent National Electoral Commission as the winner of the election. It held that Mr. Okolie was not duly sponsored by the Labour Party since he was not a member of the party as at May 28, 2022, when the party's primary was held. The tribunal eventually declared the runner-up in the February 25, 2023 National Assembly poll, Mr. Elumelu, as the winner. Mr. Elumelu, the former minority leader in the 9th House of Representatives, had filed a petition praying the tribunal to disqualify Mr. Okolie. In Adamawa State, the Governorship Election Petition Tribunal has reserved judgment on whether or not the suspended resident electoral commissioner of INEC, Mr. Hudu Yunusa Ari, can give evidence before it. Mr. Yunusa Ari, guarded by security operatives, arrived at the tribunal at about noon to give evidence in favor of the All Progressives Congress candidate, Aishatu Dahiru Binani, but left the courtroom hours after without climbing the witness box. Counsel to Governor Amadou Fintiri, Mr. Damian Dodo, had argued that Mr. Yunusa Ari was sneaked into the courtroom to give evidence contrary to procedure, as according to him, he was listed out of time. This was corroborated by the counsel to INEC, Mr. Mohammed Garba, who also objected to Mr. Yunus Ari giving oral evidence at the sitting on the grounds that he was listed out of time. However, the counsel to Mrs. Binani, Mr. Akin Olujimi, on his part, maintained that his witness, Mr. Yunus Ari, was entitled to testify before the tribunal. Staying with legal matters, the All Progressives Congress, the APC, has described as wishy-washy the petition filed by the Lagos State governorship candidate of the Labour Party, Gbadebo Rhodes Viva. In its 36-page final written address to the Governorship Election Tribunal, the APC also submitted that no evidence had been put before the three-man panel to sway its mind that the votes cast for Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu were not lawful. Mr. Rhodes Viva had on April the 9th filed a 271-page petition to challenge the return of Governor Sanwo-Olu and his deputy, Mr. Quadri Hamzat. The LP governorship candidate had told the tribunal that the election was vitiated with or by substantial non-compliance with the mandatory statutory requirements and irregularities that substantially affected the elections. In response to the petition, the APC filed a reply on May the 2nd, contesting the facts as stated by the petitioner and objecting to the competence of his petition. A number of lapses in the conduct of the 2023 general elections have been pointed out by various observers and analysts, but one of them has remained a sticking point. It's the inability of the Independent National Electoral Commission to transmit election results real-time on the day of the 2023 presidential election. Members of the civil society organizations and accredited domestic election observers are asking the nation's electoral umpire to provide more detailed explanations on the matter. Well, they were speaking at the latest in the meetings to review the conduct of the 2023 general elections in Abuja.
The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, arrives at the conference hall for a meeting with the representatives of the domestic elections observer groups accredited to monitor the 2023 general elections. This is the first time that the INEC chairman is holding a public meeting with members of the domestic elections observer groups since the conclusion of the 2023 general elections 4 months ago. The meeting is organized by INEC to review the conduct of that election. The INEC chairman begins the conversations by listing challenges that impacted on the outcome of the 2023 general elections.
As we are aware, there are many challenges encountered before and during the elections. The severe cash and fuel situations were compounded by the perennial insecurity nationwide. Their impact on our deployment plans, compounded by the behavior of some of our own officials in the field, made logistics management particularly challenging. While voter accreditation using the bimodal voter accreditation system was very successful, the uploading of results to the INEC result viewing portal, the IREV, especially for the presidential election, encountered a glitch as explained in our statement on the 26th of February 2023.
While appreciating the electoral umpire for organizing the meeting, members of the observer groups demand that the INEC chairman gives more detailed information about some of the challenges he listed in his presentation, such as the inability of INEC to transmit results in real time on the day of the presidential election.
In your speech, you indicted and recognized the role of some INEC staff that they played in undermining this election. That is a very welcome development. We're looking forward to the prosecution of these INEC staff that have been indicted. I want to also reiterate the fact that we truly need to know what happened with IREV for the presidential election without really going into what is already in the court.
INEC had accredited 190 domestic elections observer groups and 38 foreign observer missions to monitor the company conduct of the 2023 general elections. INEC says the post-election reports from these groups are critical for further electoral reforms.
In part two, after the break, 8 people burned to death after a tanker laden with petrol exploded while scooping fuel on the Ore-Benin Expressway in Ondo State. Please join us again. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live from Channels Television. A reminder of our top stories. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo bemoans what he describes as the inability of Nigeria to live up to expectations since independence, says the country has disappointed Africa and the world. House of Representatives promises a legislative agenda focused on championing the yearnings of Nigerians. Stakeholders challenge the lawmakers on effective implementation. Civil society organizations ask INEC to provide more detailed explanations on its inability to transmit election results real-time on the day of the 2023 presidential election. And despite mass protests, Israeli parliament passes highly controversial judicial bill that clips the power of the country's Supreme Court. Staying with the 2023 general elections aftermath, the Inter-Party Advisory Council IPAC is maintaining that the report of the European Union Election Observation Mission on the poll is faulty. It says the Independent National Electoral Commission performed well within the limit of its human resource and infrastructural constraints. The national chairman of the council, Mr. Yabagi Sani, told a news conference in Abuja that it became necessary to revisit the issue after a careful study of the report.
As the umbrella body of the 19 registered political parties in Nigeria that a team participated in the elections, and as the most critical stakeholders in democratic space in Nigeria, the Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC, has carried out a dispassionate review of the EU-EOM report and listened to the views expressed by all stakeholders in the Nigerian democratic process. IPAC is aware that the practice of inviting national and international observers to our elections is a veritable means of consolidating Nigeria's democratic process and has become a recurring feature of our electoral process since the restoration of democracy in Nigeria in 1999 after prolonged military rule. We observe that in the 2023 general election, the EU-EOM deployed 51 non-resident observers to Nigeria for a period of 3 months, from 11th January to 11th April 2023, to observe the election from the preparatory activities to the conduct of polls and the announcement of results. While IPAC does not interrogate the credibility of elections in any of the EU member states, nor question their electoral outcomes, the EU-EOM has over the years developed the practice of making pronouncements bordering on Nigeria's domestic affairs without due consideration of the country's independence and sovereignty.
Meanwhile, the coalition of political parties is calling on INEC to review its operational staff ahead of the off-season governorship elections. The group wants INEC to consider the various reports of domestic and international election observers ahead of the elections in Kogi, Bayelsa, Edo, and Imo states. They made the demand at a round table in Abuja. To a rather sad story from Ondo State, where 8 persons have been burnt to death while scooping fuel after a tanker laden with petrol fell on the Ore-Benin Expressway in the state. The sector commander of the Federal Road Safety Corps in Ondo State, Ezekiel Son-Allah, told Channels Television that the fuel-laden tanker developed a mechanical fault while on motion, forcing the driver to veer off the road into the bush, where the tanker fell and spilled its content. According to Son-Allah, the driver and his assistant escaped unhurt, but some residents of the nearby village rushed to the scene and started scooping the spilled fuel. In the process, the tanker exploded, leaving 8 people burnt to death, including a pregnant woman who was said to be passing by the scene. So let's head to the nation's capital, and Terry Kumi is on standby to give us the very latest from our Abuja studios. Hello, Terry. Great to see you.
Great to see you as always, Ayo. Now, efforts to avert another industrial action by the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors appear to be in top gear as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, today met with leaders of the association in Abuja promising to meet with the president on the matter. The doctors are demanding, among other things, the recruitment of clinical staff and infrastructural development in hospitals, and an allocation of at least 15% of budgetary provisions to health. The Speaker also announced the setting up of an ad hoc committee to meet with all the stakeholders to address the matter.
I encourage you to take advantage of this meeting to bear your minds on the issues at stake and suggest realistic solutions to them. We must approach these issues with an open mind and guided by the fact that revenues available to the government may not fully meet our demands. Therefore, we must find a middle ground that satisfies everyone without prejudice to the 2023 Memorandum of Understanding. We particularly note that your demands include the payment of 2023 Medical Residency Training Fund, upward review of consolidated medical salary structure, CONMES, and salary arrears dating back to 2015. These issues and more can be resolved without embarking on an judicial action. In this regard, therefore, we urge you as leaders to appeal to your members to suspend any action while we interface with the executive arm of government. We equally seek your understanding on the fact that a new administration just came on board.
Now, as Nigeria embraces alternative means of dispute resolution, some judicial stakeholders have applauded the new Arbitration and Mediation Act 2023, describing it as crucial in addressing trade and commercial disputes between countries. This was the focus at a forum put together by the College of Arbitrators, Nigeria, on the new piece of legislation, its prospects and challenges. Our correspondent Emmanuela Ekele reports.
Gathered here are lawyers, many of them with specialty in commercial law. The focal point of discussion here is looking at what may be the likely pitfalls with enforcement of the new Arbitration and Mediation Act 2023, which was signed into law on 26 May 2023 by former President Muhammadu Buhari. Arbitration is a private dispute resolution mechanism established for the settlement of disputes by a neutral third party or panels of neutrals referred to as the arbitral tribunal. The new act addresses the issue of arbitral seat, enforcement of arbitration agreements, award challenge proceedings, timelines for arbitration claims in court, and legal representation in arbitration proceedings. While the new act is laudable and addresses salient issues, the College of Arbitration is addressing the challenges of the act, which includes removal of penalties for misconduct of arbitrators from the act, the impartiality and neutrality of judges, and the speedy administration of justice.
I am personally not happy about the removal of misconduct because it is all over the place, all over the world. If I collect bribe and it is proved, and I give an award because that's misconduct. So you are now saying that I cannot go to court to set aside that award on grounds of misconduct. I think we have to look at that again.
The challenges on jurisdiction under the newly signed act and third-party funding of arbitration also came up for deliberation.
The purpose of arbitration is to give the parties an opportunity to review the agreement and maybe along the line listen to themselves and take remedial steps and bring themselves back. The purpose of arbitration is after arbitration, you can continue with the agreement where you stop.
I believe that, Prof, your committee and those who work with you, your work is not done. We must begin to engage that you have people who are, I don't want to use the word experience, but those who have some knowledge about arbitration practice.
International commerce and trade deals are hinged on agreements and contracts signed by countries involved, and arbitration comes into the picture in the event of a breach in the commercial agreement or contract. The enactment of the Arbitration and Mediation Act in Nigeria has been described as timely and demonstrates the determination of the government and the arbitration community for Nigeria to be a preferred seat of arbitration. This resolve is reasonable, considering Nigeria's position as the largest economy in Africa. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
Well, still ahead on the news at 10. Foreign transactions on the Nigerian exchange rise to over 145 billion naira in the first half of 2023. That's on Business News. Please stay with us. Well, welcome back to the news at 10. Amnesty International Nigeria is demanding a transparent coroner's inquest on the 103 slain EndSARS protesters for whom the Lagos state government is planning a mass burial. This follows the emergence of a leaked memo addressed to the Lagos State Ministry of Health, indicating that the state government approved 61 million naira for the mass burial of the 103 persons. The Lagos state government, however, maintains that the victims to be buried were not from the controversial Lekki tollgate shooting. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health, Dr. Olusegun Ogboye, while confirming the letter, explained that the victims were from incidents of violence that occurred in the aftermath of the EndSARS protests. But the director of Amnesty International Nigeria, Issa Sanusi, called on the authorities to halt their plans for the mass burial and instead carry out a thorough and independent investigation into the killings and ensure that those suspected to be responsible are brought to justice. Troops of 302 Regiment operating under 82 Division of the Nigerian Army in conjunction with Anambra Vigilante Group have destroyed camps belonging to fighters of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra and its armed affiliates, the Eastern Security Network, in Oroma and Umuewelum Anam in Anambra West local government area. A statement by the Director Army Public Relations, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, explains that the troops raided the identified camps over the weekend. During the raid, the troops recovered one AK-47 rifle, one AKMS rifle, 3 Lexus SUVs and 2 motorcycles, in addition to arresting 8 brigands during the operation. In a separate operation, troops also raided IPOP camp at Miata Anam in Anambra South, where they came in contact with the irredentist group and in the encounter neutralized one IPOP fighter while another was captured alive. The troops also recovered one AK-47 rifle, one Dane gun, and police uniforms. Meanwhile, businesses that refused to open in major markets in Enugu in compliance with the sit-at-home order by the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra IPOB have been sealed by the state government. Governor Peter Mba had on Monday last week directed that all businesses in the state should open or risk being sealed. According to the Secretary of the Government who led the team from Enugu State Capital Territory Development Authority, the idea is to demonstrate the seriousness of the government's directives.
We came to the market in furtherance of His Excellency's visit last Monday. And during that visit, market leaders, the president, the mayor himself of the local government, and all the leaders, they agreed clearly that they will continue to follow the no sit-at-home policy. So what I came today was to enforce what His Excellency has said, that the shops that are not open, that we will seal them as a deterrent. And if you look inside that market, you see that a lot of people came, but there are few people that decided not to come. So we had an agreement here in line with the policy and His Excellency's declaration that those shops will be closed. That's why the Enugu Capital Territory Authority is here, and we have started that process. Next Monday, we will be back again. Enugu Capital Territory will now communicate the process of hearing and considering if those shops will be reopened. So this is in line with what we agreed at the town hall meeting, that in the Enugu, we are tired of sitting at home.
And that's all from the nation's capital. Business News is next with Joke Rogers.
Thanks, Terry. Total foreign transactions carried out on the Nigerian exchange rose to 145.08 billion naira in the first 6 months of 2023 amid forex volatility. A breakdown of the latest trading report from the NGX shows foreign transactions grew from 37.1 billion naira in May to 45.7 billion naira in June, while total domestic transactions on the exchange stood at over 1.3 billion naira, representing an outer performance by 78%. At the same time, transactions in the equities market increased by 25.9% from 322.9 billion naira in May to 406.7 billion naira in June. Meanwhile, domestic inflows and outflows stood at 180.9 billion and 180.1 billion naira, while foreign inflows stood at 22.7 billion naira and outflows 23.02 billion naira. Economic think tank, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE, has proffered solutions to President Bola Tinubu's administration to curb volatility in the foreign exchange market. According to its Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the government should accelerate a sustainable intervention framework to moderate the current situation. He says the monetary intervention is needed to avert a possible erosion of investors' confidence to prevent speculative assault and illicit capital outflows. Nevertheless, Dr. Yusuf believes the federal government is on the right path and that the current volatility in the foreign exchange market would soon be stable. And Pan-African credit rating agency and research firm Augusto & Co. has forecast Nigeria's pension assets under management to hit 19 trillion naira at the end of next year, representing a 13% increase year-on-year. In its latest report on the pension industry, the rating firm projects that the growth will be supported by an anticipated increase in rates on fixed income securities, specifically bank placements, and a continued upswing in the stock market. At the same time, Augusto says the industry also witnessed a notable increase in the number of new contributors on the back of robust regulatory oversight and increasing awareness of the micro pension scheme. And billionaire businessman Elon Musk has chosen a new logo for his micro-blogging site Twitter, replacing the 17-year iconic blue bird with a black and white X in a major rebranding move. This is the latest big change since Elon Musk bought the company for $44 billion last year and takes the platform a step closer to his dream of creating an everything app. On Monday, Mr. Musk posted a photo of the X projected on Twitter's San Francisco headquarters as the new logo appeared on the desktop version of Twitter. However, the signature bird is still prominent on the mobile app. And let's see how equities fared in the first trading session this week as Nigeria awaits the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee rates decision on Tuesday. Will Ibong tells us more.
Welcome to the Stock Market Report. It's Monday, first trading day in the week, and the bull has still got some spring in its steps. Now, the market closed positive today despite pockets of sell-offs we saw across key sectors. However, the gains in Lafarge, FBN Holdings was able to offset the losses and push the all-share index today by 0.41%. We're still seeing that 65,000 level, and the market cap appreciating further in value by about 145 billion naira. If we take a look at the sectoral performance, you see the banking counter in the red, and this is due to losses in Zenith Bank, UBA, Access Holdings. GTCO, however, closed unchanged from its opening levels. Now, Lafarge was able to prop the industrial goods counter up, leaving Sovereign Trust Insurance and Sunu Assurance to do the magic for the insurance counter. Not a lot of winners today, as we're seeing slightly negative sentiments beginning to creep back into the market as 33 stocks lost against 32 gainers. Now, it's a fair trade today, let's admit that. Not a bad outing for the NGX, and we'll look forward to tomorrow. And that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Will Ibong.
That's business news on the news at 10. Aya, over to you.
Many thanks, Joke. Greece says it has launched the biggest rescue of its kind in response to the wildfires emergency the country is facing. Please join us again. Welcome back. Greece says it has launched the biggest rescue of its kind in response to the wildfire emergency the country is facing. Tour operators begin flying home holidaymakers as wildfires raged on in the Greek island of Rhodes, with the threat of further fires high in almost every region of that country. The fires burning since Wednesday on roads forced the evacuation of 19,000 people over the weekend as an inferno reached the coastal resorts on the island's southeast. Here's Simon Pusey with more on this and other international stories in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Israeli opposition MPs shouted "shame, shame" and walked out of parliament after the highly controversial judicial bill was passed. The law removes the power of the Supreme Court to overrule government actions it considers unreasonable. It is the first in a series of bitterly contested reforms aimed at curbing the power of the courts to be approved. The planning reforms have triggered some of the biggest protests in Israel's history, with opponents warning they imperil Israel as a democracy. Hours before the final vote, police used water cannon and arrested protesters outside Israel's parliament in Jerusalem. The controversial reforms have polarized Israel, triggering one of the most serious domestic crises in the country's history. Spain has entered a phase of political uncertainty that could see the country return to the polls in just a few months. The leaders of Spain's two main political parties, on opposite sides of the spectrum, both claimed victory, with the election failing to produce a decisive winner. The Conservative People's Party won the most seats, but fell short of a parliamentary majority, even with the support of the far-right Vox party. PP leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo and his rival, Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, have begun negotiations to try to head off a fresh vote, which might take place by the end of 2023. Russia has accused Ukraine of being behind a drone attack that damaged at least 2 buildings in the capital, Moscow, early on Monday morning. The Russian Defense Ministry said 2 drones were suppressed and crashed, adding that there were no casualties. Russia's state-owned TASS news agency reported that 1 drone fell close to the Defense Ministry. At least 15 people have been killed and thousands evacuated after wildfires broke out across Algeria. Outbreaks of 97 wildfires were recorded across 16 provinces, affecting forests, crops and farmland. Around 7,500 firefighters were working to bring the blazes under control. 26 people were also injured and 1,500 evacuated from their homes. Tour operators have begun flying home holidaymakers as wildfires raged on the Greek island of Rhodes, with the threat of further fires high in almost every region of the country. Fires burning since Wednesday on Rhodes forced the evacuation of 19,000 people over the weekend as an inferno reached coastal resorts on the island's southeast. A wildfire also forced evacuations from the island of Corfu. Tourists spent the night on the airport floor, waiting for repatriation flights, the first of which came overnight. Rhodes and Corfu are among Greece's top destinations for tourists, mainly from Britain and Germany.
Well, close up, it looked like hell on earth, to be honest. And, you know, there's a lot of fire.
Yeah, so it was just carnage. But at least we weren't actually near the worst bits. It was pretty terrible, though.
And Twitter has replaced its famous bird logo with a simple X, with the brand being projected onto its offices in San Francisco. The company had already changed its name to X Corp. It reflects Elon Musk's desire to turn Twitter into a super app, like China's WeChat, which offers payments, shopping, and other services. A leading social media analyst has questioned the reasoning behind a Twitter rebrand, saying many issues the social media app has faced over recent months will remain.
I think in changing the logo from Twitter to something different, and in the X logo, it is completely different. You know, there's no cute animal. It's a different color scheme. It's really going to have a totally different appeal. And I think they're throwing the baby out of the bathwater here, and they're losing ultimately a lot of credibility that Twitter has built up over the last, 10, 15 years. And then the last few months, really, what they should have been doing, I think, is just rewinding rather than rebuilding. And that's kind of what we're seeing now with the new rebrand.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel's studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome to Sports News. Paris Saint-Germain have granted permission for Kylian Mbappe to speak with Al Hilal after the Saudi club's world record £259 million bid. The French champions have put Mbappe up for sale and left him out of their squad for the pre-season tour of Japan and Korea, having made it clear they only want to include players who are committed to the club. Al Hilal have made a formal offer by letter, but such a transfer could only be made with the agreement of Mbappe, who has never expressed an interest in moving to the fast-growing Saudi league. To the World Cup, Nigeria's power forward, Desire Paranozie, could play some part in Thursday's cracker with a co-host at the Lang Park, as she appears to have substantially recovered from the injury she copped on the last day of the final training camp in Gold Coast, days to the FIFA World Cup. She trained on her own, kicking the ball on the side of the pitch as the other 21 players were drilled by Coach Wardrum and his assistants. The technical crew also have the versatile Jennifer Echegine on the roster, as well as Uchenna Kanu. On Tuesday, co-host New Zealand will face debutant the Philippines in their second Group A tie. New Zealand stunned Norway in their opening game 1-0, and win will see co-host advance to the round of 16. Switzerland, who enjoyed a 2-0 win against the Philippines, will face Norway in another Group A fixture. Norway will be pushing for their first win to revive their World Cup hopes. Colombia will face South Korea in a Group H opener, with a game scheduled for 3 a.m. on Tuesday. And that's it on Sports News. It's back to you, Ayotunde.
Many thanks, Chris. And the main news again. Former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo today bemoaned what he described as the inability of Nigeria to live up to expectations since independence. Chief Obasanjo, who spoke during the public presentation of a book by Mr. Olusegun Aganga in Abuja, maintained that the country has disappointed Africa and the world. And civil society organizations have asked INEC to provide more detailed explanations on its inability to transmit election results real-time on the day of the 2023 presidential election. That's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for watching. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. Have a good night.